Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Monday, September 1st, 2025, episode 478, and it's Labor Day. So we're going to talk about labor. A couple of things. School starts on Wednesday, so I'm going to try, but I don't know if I'd be able to maintain this daily episode schedule. I'll do my best. If I can't do any in the week, I definitely will try to do one at least on Friday. And of course, my Sunday episodes will continue to be uploaded. Another thing too, I've just found out that the arbitration judgment verdict is delayed. There'll be a few more weeks before that comes out. Also, I've been thinking about it. My new school is quite conservative, and I would probably not wish that it would be publicly known that I have this channel. I think a lot of people would be upset by the content. And so I'm not going to share my name and start showing my face because, you know, it's just, I'd like to stay there for a while, right? So anyway, having said that, Labor Day is a federal holiday to honor the American labor movement, right? So you're like, oh, okay. So workers in America. 100 Canada celebrates Labor Day in the way that America does, but 150 other countries celebrate what's called International Workers' Day, and that's celebrated on May 1st, May Day. And I did an episode on it earlier this year, episode 376. You can check that out. And there, I'm two things that I raise in that episode is Entrepreneurs Day. Peter Schiff says, well, instead of having Labor Day, let's have Entrepreneurs Day, because without the capital, without the investment, without the machines, without the factories, without the businesses, what would workers do, right? Especially when you go to a poor country, it's not the lack of workers or the willingness of workers to work, but it's the lack of capital. It's the lack of businesses. It's the lack of factories that can, where you're going to find these jobs. Also, in that episode, you're going to hear about the victims of Communism Day, right? That May Day should actually be a victim of Communism Day because celebrating the labor is a communist concept. And so, in order to enact and establish communism, which is an unnatural political ideology, right? It's an ideology that's so bad that only academics and PhDs could believe is possible, right? Because it's so idealistic to the point where it's narrow-minded and uh, it becomes the mask for just simply power-hungry people, right? How can he seize power and not have to do any work and sponge off of everybody else, right? That basically is the way I would describe communism. And because of it, because of communism, the way that other countries have tried to put it into action, over 100 million people are dead, right? So they're all dead in the name of workers' rights. Some people would estimate that in China alone, it's over 100 million, but of course, without accurate data, it's hard to say that. But conservatively, 100 million people are dead in the name of workers' rights. But then you got to ask yourself, which workers, right? And you have to realize it's only celebration of organized workers, that is, workers who have formed a union. In other words, workers who are able to successfully create a monopoly on the labor for specific jobs and specific markets, certain areas of work. So other workers, including immigrants and people of color in general, are not included. They are not to be celebrated, right? It's only the union worker who deserves this praise and attention and who we should thank for this holiday, for this day off. But if you So what if you don't know what a union is? Basically, it's a bunch of workers at a company who say, "Oh, we're going to form an organization. You have to treat us as a unity. So you don't uh, negotiate with each of us one at a time. You negotiate with all of us collectively, right? So they have one representative." And so the business has to negotiate with that one single representative, and everyone else agrees to go along with any agreement that they come up with. In exchange for that, the business cannot hire any other outside workers. They can only hire people within the union. So if the union decides to go on strike, they cannot just fire all of them and hire new workers, right? There are all these rules, regulations, laws in place which basically protect these monopolies on workers. You can't hire anyone else, basically. And so it's essentially a monopoly. But the ability to be paid less is a tool, right? Now, granted, why would some people be paid less? Well, because they have lower skills. And until they gain the skills that they need to be able to um, compete and do a great job, well, they should be paid less. And there are also other restrictions too, which is why some people would opt not to join the union. Nevertheless, um, unskilled, so-called unskilled workers, workers who are not in the union, they are discriminated against. And so it's not all laborers who are celebrated, only some of them, right? Because the vast majority of laborers are not unionized. Milton Friedman talks about and discusses this phenomena of how being paid less is a tool to be used if when needed. So, for example, equal pay for equal work was invoked in the 1980s by women. Women wanted to be paid the same as men at the same job. And he made the argument in this video that I found, and that I would always share in class, that equal pay for equal work did not help women. It hurt women. Right. And the reason is this, because if a woman is actually more skilled and better at a job than a man, then equal pay for equal work doesn't help that woman. But if uh, a man is discriminatory, is a sexist, and only wants to hire men, then the cost of hiring only men, the more expensive worker, is erased, right? So if being a sexist, well, I'm only going to hire men, so I have an arbitrary bias, right? A gender bias within me, so I'm only going to hire men. But men cost more. And so therefore, people who think that way and act in that way should have to pay for their discrimination. By paying women and men in the same, you erase that cost. You erase the penalty of that discrimination. And so therefore, most sexist men will not hire women at all. And so Friedman looks at, and so basically it hurts women, right? So Friedman looks at the young lady who challenged him on this and said, I'm on your side, but you're not, right? But you want people to be forced to pay for their discrimination. I've talked about that before as well. So Labor Day uh, is basically hypocritical. It's hypocrisy. You're going to celebrate some workers, over against other workers. Also, you're going to um, cause other uh, arbitrary discrimination throughout society. That is to say, by catering to the needs of a small minority, a special interest group, here in this situation, you create problems in other parts of society, which of course no one associates with the formation of the union and the existence of the union. And so they get to be comfortable advocating for the things that they want while discriminating against other people, being unfair to other people, right? So they can do that. And it is unnecessary. Labor Day is unnecessary. All you need is a willingness to work and to take advantage of opportunity when they appear, right? So if the union says you can only teach 4 classes per semester, well, most people get comfortable with that. But what I always did was whenever I had the opportunity to take on an extra class, right? Because the upper limit, right? What would they call that? Emergency, like some kind of emergency situation. They lost, someone is unable to teach a class. Then I would step up and teach that class. And so I would have 5 classes per semester and I would get paid more for that. And so, of course, I would always do that. Then when the grad students went on strike at my school, and they needed a lot of instructors to fill the classrooms, I I volunteered to teach 3 extra classes. I would have taught 4, but I think my wife didn't let me. I might have taught, yeah, that's what it was. I taught 8 classes or 7 classes that semester. I wanted to do 8. I could have done it, right? But you know, there it was. And I wanted all that money, right? And so if you have the willingness to work, then you can make the money. That's not really the big deal. It's just that certain people want certain conditions, so work less but still have more money. I think it's a terrible argument, right? So, yeah, it's unnecessary. Labor Day is unnecessary. Plus, it is hypocritical. Entrepreneurs Day, as Peter Schiff would say, and as I also mentioned this last year, it's about taking risks, right? They create the jobs for the laborers or the workers, and the protection for everybody else is competition, right? It's competition that forms as a result of having a free society. That is our protection. People don't really realize this, especially Marxists. You know, they hate competition. They say, I'm not into that competition thing because they don't understand it, right? Competition says that the best should win, and winning, understanding winning is needs to be looked at, right? So if I'm competing with someone, and I can sell something at a cheaper price. Well, my competition goes to me. I win the competition by having more customers, right? So I produce the better product, the higher quality product, the less expensive product, then I win the competition. Okay. But it doesn't mean that no one else can continue to do what they want to do. It's just that they'll have fewer customers. Um, uh, so business competition between businesses keep the business honest and fair, right? Because if you start cheating, you start lowering the quality, cutting corners, your competitors don't, well, then it becomes clear on the marketplace, fewer people buy your stuff, and the other producers start getting more customers. Competition in the labor force also keeps wages fair while incentivizing workers to work harder, right? So without competition among the workers, then laborers are basically overpaid, right? In other words, without competition, you don't really know what workers should be paid. So you can have a lazy worker, but he's being paid union wages and he's definitely overpaid. And then the union wages themselves may be too high, which means all union workers are overpaid. Or excuse me, most of them would be. And then you have a few workers in the union who really are masters, right? They really know their stuff. Well, they should be paid more, but right, it's not, you can't do that in a union, right? So laborers are generally overpaid without competition, and truly good workers are not compensated what they should be getting. The greatest gains in our society also are because of innovation, right? If workers become too expensive, then they're replaced by machines. If you want to somehow increase productivity, bring make your products cheaper, then you bring in machines, you bring in automation. Henry Ford was able to pay his workers twice what other factories were paying their workers because of the assembly line. He was able to produce cars so much faster that he could not only pay his workers double what everyone else was making, the average wage in the country, but he was also able to make greater profits, and also more people were able to buy cars. So the innovation, the increases in productivity, the creativity in coming up with new products doesn't come from the laborer, right? It doesn't come from the person who works the line, but it comes from the person who owns the business, right? Um, and workers generally don't think of those things at all. Like when I was looking for a job, uh, after leaving the university, there were some administrative jobs. And like when I was leaving my last school, there was an administrative job and I didn't get it. And looking back, I think it was a good thing for me because it is such a headache. You have to do so much more. It's more tedious. You have to deal with more parents. And it's a hassle that I think I would have done poorly, right? But as a worker, as just a simple teacher, then my job focus is much narrower. And I think for my needs, that would have been much, much better. So the higher you go in a corporation or in a business setup, the more responsibilities you have, right? The more stress you probably have in your life. And, I already have enough stress with the church, so, I'm satisfied as a simple worker, right? But see, that's the thing. The people who own the business, they have more risk. There's a lot more responsibility, and that's why they are paid more. Now, people can still have unions if they want. I'm not saying you can't have unions. People can have unions if they're voluntary, right? But in a lot of areas, you're forced to join the union, but whatever. So, people can have unions if they want, but they should also be free not to join a union. And as long as freedom reigns in society, then who really cares, right? Freedom to hire who you want at the pay that you want, freedom to accept a job offer, right? Freedom to work, freedom to move, freedom to trade, that is to buy and sell whatever you want to whoever you want at the price that you want, right? People may still want a union worker because of their special expertise, and they'll pay extra for it, but that work will always have to compete against unskilled labor. And so most people will weigh their options. They'll say, well, I can't afford the union worker, so I'll just afford the guy who's not. So I'll hire the one who's not. And I've used lots of non-union work, and a lot of them are really, really good, arguably even better than union workers. So there's that. Uh, Unions, though, as a whole, prevent innovation. I mean, sometimes there's a little improvement that they do, but it's nothing compared to the creativity of freedom, right? And unions are by nature conservative. That is, they seek to preserve the old ways. They don't like modernization. They don't like automation. They don't like, improving the methods that they use to fulfill their job. And that makes them regressive. Okay, they're regressive. They're conservative, therefore they are regressive. They go backwards, right? They don't improve society, they keep society back. The longshoremen strike that I mentioned before is a recent example. One of their biggest complaints was automation. Automation would have made them more efficient, be able to work faster, which probably would have meant they would need more workers. And so all their jobs would have been preserved, but they didn't like the idea of something else, a machine doing their job, something that they used to always do. And so there's no improvement. And so American ports are probably grossly inefficient as compared with other ports in the world, particularly Chinese ports. Public transportation, right? That's right. Public means paid for by the government. Uh, what do we pay for? They want more increases in salary, but for what? Uh, Less service, decreasing quality of the actual transportation facilities. Like if you go to Korea, like I've been to Korea, and you compare the subway there with the subways here, right? It's just it's there's no comparison. Uh, American public transportation systems are trash. It, yeah, they're trash. It's a global embarrassment, really. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can YouTube videos of what it looks like in Korean subways, and they don't look like subways. Okay. Um, Let's see. And this is how you know that innovations like a shorter work week, better working conditions did not come from unions. When you have freedom and competition everywhere, then you have people trying to bid away, entice away your best workers, right? So unions treat everyone the same until there are layoffs. Then if you were last in to join the union, then you're the first one to get laid off. Think about what if farm workers were protected, then we'd all still be farmers, right? Because they would say no to tractors, better tractors, huge tractors, right? We'd all still be working and we'd be hungry all the time as well. So embracing freedom makes communist the communist irrelevant and unnecessary, right? Because the communists are basically the most lazy people in society. And if you go back to my communism episodes, then you'll know that there's the bourgeoisie, right? The people who own the factories, and then you have the proletariat, the workers, and then you have the communists. The communists are the people who are going to oversee everything happening in the new society after the communist revolution. They don't do any work, right? It's like Bernie Sanders. He doesn't want to do any work, but he just wants to eat everyone else's food, right? That's what communists are. They're the most laziest people. And that's what a lot of scholars are, a lot of academics, a lot of professors, right? They want to live in a society where they just sit around and think all the time and not have to actually do any work. So, communism mentally poisons societies. So instead of celebrating Labor Day, we should have Freedom Day, Entrepreneurs Day, right? All holidays should be Freedom Day, free to celebrate whatever it is that you want on this particular day. And so I hope you have a wonderful Freedom Day, and I'll talk to you next time.